Hi everybody, and welcome to a tech learning video. I'm Kyle, the coding craftsman, and today we're going to be taking a look at a simple way to creating a multi-processed application on a Linux machine. We're going to be using C++ to do this and the fork system call. So we're going to jump right in and take a look at that. I've got my Pop! OS VM up and running, and we're going to just create a real simple terminal application that's going to fork off to create two processes, and it's going to do two things at the same time. We're going to try to demonstrate that here today. So we're going to start today with just a simple C++ program that will take in a text file, read it, and then just write the contents of that file out one line at a time to the screen. So first, let's start with that. So we're going to start by creating the new file, read file.cpp. And this program is going to be pretty straightforward. It's just going to read in the text file. We're going to pass the name in when the program starts. It's not going to be overly complicated, but we'll just get started by including the IO stream. And we'll want to include strings. And we're going to be using the namespace std to try to save us a little bit of typing. So let's go int main. Going to create a variable for the file name. Then we're just going to do a simple prompt to enter the file name. And we're going to pipe that in to our file name variable. We're going to need some streams. I don't have to have those included yet, so we'll include file streams. And then we'll create a file for the file name. Just put a comment here to open the file for reading. If the file did not open for whatever reason, we want it to simply just error out. I'm not going to do any fancy error checking here. I'm just going to say the file name, and that's it, and then just end the program. Since this is demonstration, I don't want to have it be anything too crazy fancy. I am going to try to read it one line at a time. Oops. And so I'm going to say while get line we're going to just output that line to the screen. What do I call it? I want to say line. And the most important part whenever opening and manipulating files is always remember to close the file. Turn 0. All right, so this is just a real simple text file, but to read in a text file, we need some text files. So let's start with, we're gonna go download some text of a couple of files. I'm gonna pick a couple of them from Project Gutenberg. Let's see, what can we pick? I like the Count of Monte Cristo. I didn't type enough there. Critso. Yep, we just want the plain text. Oops. Let's paste all that text in there. All right, now we're going to compile the readfile.cpp, and I'm going to output it to a program called readfile. Oh, and I had a bunch of errors. Yep, I do have a few. Oops. Well, I guess typing isn't my strong suit. I'm gonna count, apparently. There we go. It's gonna work this time. There we go. So now I can call the read file program, and I'm gonna type in the name. And it reads all of it in. That works pretty well. Somewhat simplistic, but it does exactly what we want it to. Now, that's pretty fast. So in order to make this showing a multiprocessing thing work a little better, let's slow this program down a little bit. So we're going to slow this down by just putting a pause in that loop when it's reading the files. And to do that, I'm going to include the thread library. And if we come down here into this loop, I'm just going to put a little bit of a delay. Well, let's start with this thread. Sleep for, no, we'll say milliseconds. We'll say 500 milliseconds. Well, this is a long book, so we'll only make it 100 milliseconds. Let's recompile that. Make sure it works. Count Monte Cristo.txt. So now it's significantly slower. We can see there's a noticeable pause as it's reading each line in. So now we have that. That works for a single process. The program is running continuously. Now, to make it work so that it's using the fork command, we're going to want to do something a little bit, not really even a little bit different. We're going to fork it. What the fork command does is it copies all of the content of the running program, all the memory, the program itself, all the registers, everything, and it duplicates it. So now it's running in a separate process. And that works great. And it's simple, but we have to identify in our code which process we're running. And then we have to modify it a little bit so that it's not doing the same thing. Each process kind of has to know which one it is. So to do that, first let's download another book. Let's get something that's different. Alice in Wonderland. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This is a good one. We're going to just VI Wonderland. Paste the content of that book in, which is a little bit of a smaller book compared to the Count of Monte Cristo. So now we've got two books. Oops, I didn't want to edit that one. VI, we're going to want to read this one here. Now, the code is going to have to change just a little bit so that it can determine what file it wants to read in before it writes it output. So I think the first thing we want to do is we're going to want to make a simple function. We'll call it void. We'll just call it read. And it should just be the file name. And then in here, it'll be the exact same code that we've had before. We're going to just move it from down here all of this up to here. Oops. And put it in here. So now it's the same code, works the exact same way. The difference is now it's in its own function. And just to make sure that everything is working, see, it doesn't quite work as expected. Because it does have in there, so let's say read file name. And for simplicity, we're just going to get rid of that error out return. And instead we'll put everything wrapped around an else statement. This just kind of simplifies the use of the return value, which I could make the program or the function return an int value. Not necessarily the end of the world. But now we want to read file. We're just going to say Wonderland. So now it's reading in Alice in Wonderland. So that gets us all the way up to having a function that calls it. Now we just need to implement the fork command. Okay, so now we're going to modify this program again. And this time, to make it a little bit easier to understand what's happening. Well, yeah, so the first thing we'll do is when we output the line from the file, we're also going to output that file name first. So that way we can see which file it's coming from. And that'll help prove that we're multiprocessing the two files. And I'm going to also make a slight modification just to make it go a little faster. I'm going to change it to file name. I'm going to set this one equal to the count of Monte Cristo. And string file name 2 called Wonderland. And then we will just comment out the reading of the files. And now what we're going to do is we'll create an integer value to track the process ID of the application. And now we're going to fork the code. So we're going to call the fork command. Actually, I need to set that process ID equal to the fork command. And that is, at that point, the program splits into two separate processes. So first thing I'll check, we'll put in just a simple error check. I'll say if PID is less than 0, then that means we've failed to create the fork. And we're just going to return out. And then I'll say else if. And here, if the process ID is equal to 0, then, oops, too many returns. Then if it's equal to 0, then we are now in the child process. So if it's a child process, we're going to run the count of Monte Cristo. So we will say read file name. And then I will say else. The PID is greater than 0. We are in the parent. And then I will say read in file name 2. Oh, I forgot to include the right library for fork. So to include the right library here, I need to come up to the top and we will say include unistd.h. All right, now when we read the file, we should see both files being read and output to the screen. Oh, could not open wonderland.txt. So what is... Oh, the child process is still running, so I actually have to wait for it to be killed. Because it's going to take me a small eternity. So we're going to have to figure out what that process is and kill it. What if I can just stop it there? Does that kill it? Wonderland.txt. Oh, that's because I can't type. Oh, I have to g++ read file.cpp out. So now we can see that it is bouncing between the two systems or the two processes because they are both running at the same time, as much as the same time as they can in this environment. They each have their own process and they will continue to run until they both finish. And we could go through all this. I'll let it sit here and then we'll kind of speed through it because Count of Monte Cristo does take a while since I still have that 100 millisecond break there. But we will show it here as soon as it finishes. Okay, so I let it finish and you can kind of see here there's some files. The problem that I didn't take into account is there's so much text in the Count of Monte Cristo that you can't see that they're both writing. You could kind of see it while it was running in real time. But the thing I wanted to point out is sometimes you get multiple lines from one book versus the other because it just depends on how the operating system prioritizes that work to be read and printed to the screen. So that's an example of using the fork command on a Linux system in a C++ program. If you have enjoyed this video, I would appreciate the like and follow. If there is other things like this that you would like to see or like me to try to demonstrate a little bit better, why don't you go ahead and put that in the comments. I will take a look at it and see what I can do. Until next time, everybody, take it easy, and I will see you later.